guys, Liz Merrick here. I'm going to show you today how to make this really cool wine bottle cake. It's actually just like a wine themed cake. And what we have here is a wine bottle with a custom edible image. This is made out of Isomalt, so it's edible. And then we have a little sugar glass with wine and grapes and everything. And I'm going to show you how to make all of this. And I just wanted to say though, if this is too intimidating for you and you don't want to use sugar, you can use a tiny little glass and a little bottle of wine, and that still looks really, really cute. So if you are not to the level where you want to be working with Isomalt and you don't want to be making molds, you don't have to. But just in case, I wanted to show you what it looks like with a real Isomalt wine glass and an Isomalt bottle with a custom label. So let's get started. So now it's time to start stacking our cake. So I have our 3 layers of vanilla butter cake. This recipe can be found on my website, as well as some whipped ganache, which is also on my website, artisancakecompany.com/recipes. And you're going to need an 8-inch cake board and a 6-inch cake board. And the first thing I'm going to do is actually remove the top and bottom thin layer of brown crust. And the reason I'm just doing this is because I know this cake is going to be cut open and used to be taking pictures, so I want to make sure that the top and bottom crust doesn't show next to my filling. This is not a step you have to do. If you ever want your slices to look really beautiful, you can skin off the top and the bottom, and that way the cake looks really clean and crisp next to your filling, your buttercream, whatever. So after you have the tops and the bottoms of the cake skinned, we're going to go ahead and start stacking. Place your 8-inch cake board down and put your first layer of cake on. Nice thick layer of your whipped ganache, and then another layer of cake, whipped ganache, your last cake layer. And before we do our outside coat of ganache, we're going to take our 6-inch cake layer, place it on the top, and use it as a guide to trim off the top layer of cake just a little bit all the way around to make our barrel shape. Just make small sawing motions until you have the desired shape. And remember, this is half of a barrel. The best part is now we have cake scraps to eat. Yum. So once we have our cake shaped, go ahead and put on your layer of ganache, and because our cakes are chilled, it should start firming up pretty fast. So you don't really need to do a crumb coat, chill, and then put another coat of ganache. You can just put one sort of even layer of ganache over everything. Use your spatula to smooth out any lumps or bumps. It doesn't have to be perfect because it is going to be a barrel. And then once you're happy with everything, we'll go ahead and put this back into the fridge for maybe 15-20 minutes while we prep our fondant and get ready to cover it. So now we're going to make a few grapes to kind of just go with our little wine theme. And what I have here is some red fondant. And I made this fondant. This is with my LMF recipe, but you could buy pre-made fondant or gum paste if you could find red gum paste. And I'm just adding a little bit of Regal purple to this to kind of give it a purple tone. And it doesn't have to be dark purple because we're going to give some of these grapes a light airbrushing to give our grapes some, like, you know, dimension, because that's how nature is. So I'm going to add some Tylose powder. This is the kind that I like, and you can get that on Amazon. I'm just going to work that in, about a teaspoon. Now, because this is fondant, I want it to dry like gum paste. Got a little bit of shortening here just to kind of keep things from sticking to my hands and keeps the fondant gum paste from drying out. So because everything's on a miniature scale, you know, we don't want to be making full-sized grapes that would be like, you know, like this big, because that's going to look disproportionate to our bottles. We want to be making tiny grapes, so about the size of a pea. So to make a bunch of grapes at once, we're going to roll out a piece of our fondant like so, and just kind of chop it up. It don't have to be exactly the same, but this kind of speeds up the process of making the little circles. So take a piece of our floral wire, and we're just going to put a little small hook on the end, and we're going to roll one of our grapes. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm going to dip this into some pasteurized egg whites because that just helps dry things really easily. And just press that in and give it a little twist. And then we're going to do that about 5 million more times. This is a good time to maybe watch some Netflix. In case you're wondering, this is 26 gauge floral wire. Okay, so once we have a good amount of grapes made, we're just going to set these aside so that they can dry overnight before we assemble everything. Okay, so I'm going to cover my cake in some fondant. This is my LMF fondant. I've just nuked this for 40 seconds so that I can knead it and get it to the stretchy stage, because it's, you know, when it tears like this, it's not good to roll out. So we want to warm it and pull it like taffy until it's stretchy and ready. Got a nice stretch going. Now I'm going to add a little bit of ivory, about 1/3 of this, and I'm going to color that ivory. We're going to bring that over to our white, and we're going to slightly marble. We just want to kind of keep it in these long strips where you pull and you fold over and you pull. Kind of keeps everything looking like wood grain. Okay, don't mix it too much. Don't want to lose all that work we did. Roll this out. See how we have these nice long strips? That's what we want. Just going to cut this in half. Kind of make it a little bit easier to handle. Make them too thin. Okay, that one's good. Just gonna pop this into freezer while I work on the other one. Don't worry about the parts hanging over. This is like perfect little cool looking, kind of wood looking eye. Need a little bit to go on the top. I'm going to trim that down a little bit. Put our cake there. I'm just going to roll out a small enough piece to go over the top. There. Work out any bubbles that are hanging out. Just going to leave about 1/4 inch going all the way around so that we have something to glue our panels to. Okay, this fondant's been in the freezer for about 5 minutes. I'm going to work fast. I'm just going to cut the bottom edge so that it's straight. And because this is semi-frozen, it should be a lot easier to handle. So we can just wrap that around our cake fairly easily. Just let the top part do its thing. Trim off that. Use your smoother to make sure it's pressed against the ganache securely. And then right at the top lip, just going to trim off that excess. So we kind of want this lip right here. Second piece here, just cut it right about here. Just going to overlap there. And a couple places where it's not sticking, we use a little water to make sure that this sticks where it's supposed to stick. And I want it to stick at this upper edge. Trim off your upper edge. And then I want to cut through both of the overlapped edges. Pull off the outside, pull back this side, and that way we have nice flush edge right there. Glue down with more water as necessary. And do the same thing to the other edge. And then if you've got any spots where the bottom is bulging out, you can just trim that off and then just use your smoother to get a nice edge around the bottom. making sure I didn't lose my top edge. Right. So now we're going to start putting in some barrel slats. And you want those to be about 2 inches wide. Try and just go straight up. Go over a couple times if you need to. They should get slightly thinner as you get to the top, proportionately. Straighten out your top edge. You can cut sort of down through if you want to. Make it look a little bit more like slats. Maybe use even an X-Acto blade. That's probably a little bit easier to cut. Alright, so now we want to do a little bit of texturing on our slats here. And I'm just using my modeling tool to put in some lines. They don't have to be very deep. The texture is good. Texture is important on top of a cake because when you leave things smooth, your mind automatically is like, that's not real. Because most things in nature are not perfectly smooth unless they're glass. So if something's rough, you want to give it a rough texture. Even if it's just a hint of texture, it's going to immediately look so much better and much more realistic. The next thing that we're going to do is a little bit of wash on top of our cake, and we are going to use our ivory food color again, and we're going to focus on a couple of places. One of them is in between the slats. We're just going to roughly sort of brush on in between each slat, and I'm using water to dilute this down. But you can use vodka or you could use lemon extract if that's something you want to do. Something that has a high alcohol content because it evaporates a little bit faster is best. After you focus on that, you want to just kind of go around in some random places with just a touch of some ivory. And I'm not trying to be too specific here. And then with your clean brush, you're going to go back through and just brush upwards to just kind of streak everything. You don't want it to be too wet because we don't want to get rid of that texture we just made. Just wet enough to kind of streak everything together, if that makes sense. That looks pretty good. If you feel like you have too much on there, and you can always come back with a damp paper towel and just wipe off any excess food color. I want to put some lines on top too and basically do the same thing. Next, I'm going to do a little airbrushing with brown airbrush color. I'm just going to airbrush a little bit of this color down into the crevices, barely pulling back, not a lot of color coming out. The key to good airbrushing is light layers. You don't want to be up too close. Also be aware that color darkens the longer it sits, so stop at the point you feel like it's just a little too light because it will darken up. I'm just going to go around the base a little bit and then up onto the crevice on top. There we go, looking very woodsy. So what I'm going to do now is roll out some gray strips. We're going to have one thick, one thin, and then another thick one down at the base. I'm actually going to use some of my leftover ivory and just put a touch of black in there. Just going to roll our gray out. We want this to be thin, but not like thicker than the actual layer of fondant that we did, but not like, you know, super thick. I'd say like, you know, 1/8 of an inch. I like to use this Wilton sort of ribbon cutter because it's just kind of convenient for me to make lines. And I won't actually use it to make my actual cuts because it's not very good at cutting, but it is good at making lines so that I can come back with my X-Acto and make a pretty clean cut. That's the thickness that I want it to be. Okay. And then we want to stick it kind of like this to be my front. So I'm going to start my seam in the back. I'm just going to get my top slightly damp so that our, of course, getting drippy. I'm just going to roll this up like a big fondant fruit roll up. What I say was the front. This? No, this is the front, okay. And then I'm just gonna go all the way around with this guy until I get to the back. And then we're gonna do the same size around the bottom. You can do this one in 2 strips if you need to. Make sure you line your back up. Sometimes I forget and accidentally put my seams in the front. I hate when I do that. If you can't make it quite long enough. I think it'll be okay. And then our last one, we want to be thinner. I'm going to do 1/2 inch. Roll it out one more time. Just slightly, oops, see, I almost didn't line up my seams. Just a little bit below. Okay. I'm going to line up our second piece. Bringing my airbrush back over again. I'm just going to go in and just put a little bit of definition right at the top because I'm obsessive like that. Maybe even highlight some of the little line areas. When you're this close to the cake, you barely have to pull back at all to get any color to come out. So basically, the closer you are to your cake, the less you want to pull back on your airbrush. Make sure you wash out your airbrush with some water after every single use, otherwise it will clog. So I'm going to go wash this out and then we'll continue on. This band right here has rivets. So just with like a piping tip, just go around and on each slat put in a rivet like that. And then on the back, you can do one on each one. Okay? And then I'm going to use some new silver. This is Sarah Myers' brand. It's like a steampunk line of dust from the sugar art that I really like. I'm just going to put that into my cap. And we're just going to dry brush on. It doesn't have to be, you know, we don't want it to like completely cover. Like we're not trying to get chrome here. But we want it to have like a slight shine in some places. Kind of want that old silvery look. nice kind of brushed silver look. Then, if you want to, you can go in with a little bit of black. This is Midnight Black from Colorants Rich and Roxy, but any sort of black would do. You can just kind of put in a couple little dark spots here and there to just sort of add to this overall metal look. Randomness is the key. Don't want to look too specific doing anything. That's why I love doing textures so much, because it doesn't have to be perfect. You know, I'm not good at making perfect little details. Random details I am good at. Pretty good, guys. Last thing I'm going to do before I put this in the fridge to chill is I'm going to spray it with a coating of water to kind of seal in all of our dusts. I'm just going to take a little water and put it in my airbrush, pull back full blast, just give everything a nice, this is basically steaming, but it just sets all of our color so that it has a nice richness to it and doesn't look dull. You don't want to do too much, like we don't want it to be wet. Okay? I'm going to put this whole thing into the refrigerator to chill for a little bit. Before I use my grapes, I'm going to airbrush them a little bit with some violet airbrush food color. I'm just going to do one side so that they'll have just basically variation. Try not to blow them away. And they look almost black because it's a very dark purple, but red wine grapes are very dark. So this gives them that realistic look. Okay, so let's go ahead and prep our board. I have my cake boards that I like to use from Cake Support Solutions. And then I have some poster board here. Then this one has some sticky back, so I don't have to use a glue gun, which I just recently discovered, and I love it because I love anything that saves me time. Just one less thing to plug in. I got this at Hobby Lobby, but I'm sure they have it at other type of hobby stores. There we go. Board is complete. Now I'm going to go ahead and place my chilled cake on top of the board. Just going to use a little offset spatula. Put that up off of the board here. I'm just going to center that on top. And you could use some melted chocolate to secure your cake to the board if you felt like there was a danger of it sliding around. But I find that when a cake is chilled and it starts coming to room temperature, it condensates a little bit, and that condensation makes the fondant sticky, and that glues itself basically to the board. So set that over here. I need to put together my grapes. So, grapes. Pretty easy. We have our little circles, or spheres I guess you could call them, that we created yesterday. And we're going to put them in a couple little bunches, 4 or 5. Just twist them together. Just do that to all of them. You can make some bunches bigger than others for variety. Got some French lilac from Colorants Rich and Roxy, and I'm just going to dust some of my grapes. This just gives them kind of that dusty, I think it's yeast that grows on grapes. Not really covering all of them, just kind of, you know, just kind of putting the light dusting on some various places. to make a bunch, let's move this out of the way. Take one of your little bunches of grape and then put another bunch slightly above, you know, like here's the top, so just slightly right there, and twist, and then put another bunch here. And then we could make maybe 3 of these bunches together, twist together, and we can put that right here. 3 more. So we have this nice natural bunch of grapes that sort of gradually works its way up into like a big bulky bunch of grapes, if that makes sense. And then at the very, very end, I'm just going to put one more right there. Just going to put with all of our leftover stem here, we're going to take a little bit of our green floral tape. We're going to cover those wires up. We don't leave wires exposed on cakes. Green floral tape, give it a nice stretch to activate it. And starting at the base, just work our way up. Like that, and then you can just kind of give the stem a little twist so that it looks, you know, finished. We have our nice little bunch of grapes. And if you wanted to, because, you know, grapes sometimes have some little shiny spots, you could just go in with like a little brush and just kind of brush in a couple little shiny spots with a little bit of water. Just gives those grapes a little bit of extra dimension. Another one of the templates that you'll have in your PDF tutorial printout is something that you can print onto wafer paper, and these are little grape leaves, and you can print them onto wafer paper. The texture and the color is already there, so you don't have to color gum paste or do anything like that, because sometimes you just need like a really quick leaf or decorative thing. So it's nice to just print it out onto wafer paper with the edible ink, because then you have something that looks like it was a lot of work, but it was not. So go ahead and just cut out your little leaf after you print it out, and then make a couple of incisions with your scissors here, just a couple little like random places. And then you're gonna spritz this with just a little bit of water, or you could very lightly dab on some water with a paintbrush. You could risk smearing your ink. So you just wanna give it just a very light spray and just start kind of curling up these little tips just a little bit. It might seem like the water is not doing anything at first, but it is. And just set that aside to dry. And then what you have is this guy. So he's like a little curly leaf that we have created. You can just make like a little slit right there. You can dab on a little bit of piping gel. Place that there and just crisscross your leaf right over that wire and sandwich it in between the piping gel that you applied to the leaf. And then just let that dry, and then we can put that as a little accent on our, get this to stick, we can put it as a little accent on our grapes. You have to give it time to stick though. Okay, so the last thing to do is to just place our bottle in our little glass. And I would do this honestly, like at the delivery place. Like I probably wouldn't deliver with delicate sugar pieces on top of the cake. And like I said, if you wanted to just use the glass and a little plastic bottle of wine, you could take off the label and put the wine label on just this thing. If this is too intimidating for you and just do the cake and the grapes, that still will look really great. But I wanted to show you how to do the sugar pieces too, just in case you wanted to do that. So, but I wanted to just show you what it looks like all finished. That's it, guys. That's how you make a beautiful barrel wine cake. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys next time.